Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you all had a great weekend. We had a bit of a summer's day yesterday, but it's back to being cloudy again. Macro thoughts: dissonant markets may be underestimating risks to stability, says the Bank of International Settlements. And I think I characterized them as arrhythmic markets. And if you want to look at the entire quarterly review, the link is there on Rich Wrap-Ups. And another interesting point, which I took up in my Mindspeak presentation over the weekend, is about bank valuation, saying that these struggles are adding to market dissonance. I compared, for example, Barclays PLC with Barclays Kenya, and Barclays Kenya's outperformed, although it's gone down, by about 20%. And you thought it was boring. One overnight interbank rate spikes to the highest since January. This was a move that saw it jump 15.7 percentage points to 23.7%, its second biggest gain on record. Home thoughts: we had a lovely lunch yesterday with Mr. and Mrs. Pike, and I took a photo of the garden and tweeted it Nairobi Garden. And Lonely Planet, in introducing Nairobi, telling people that you like Nairobi is like voicing a guilty secret. Yes, Nairobi's reputation precedes it, and yes, it's a city where it pays to keep your wits about you. But there are many people who don't just like Nairobi, but who wouldn't want to live anywhere else. For those who call it home, the city's muscular, cosmopolitan charms include a vibrant cultural life, fabulous places to eat, and exciting nightlife. If you're passing through, this melting pot of people and attractions has the intriguing National Museum, an unlikely national park, black rhinos and all, an irresistible elephant orphanage, the ground zero for the Rothschilds giraffe, Karen Blixen's former home, and so much more. Welcome to one of Africa's most dynamic cities, place you'll almost certainly pass through, and one that you could just learn to like if you gave it half a chance. Put up a photograph from Sam Dave of Nairobi taken in the evening, and I like this new image. The King and I will be shown for the first time. David Yarrow. Political reflections: the United Nations works for all people everywhere. Ban Ki-moon explains. Of course, there's the big UNGA, UN General Assembly, meet up this week. That should be interesting to watch. These set pieces always are. I presented at Mindspeak over the weekend. The link for my presentation, which is an incredibly big file, is there as well. If you care to take a look, I'd like to thank everybody who came. It was a great session, and William Murithi in particular, who took a photograph with me. And he tweeted, "Learning Investment 101 for investors was a great day." My piece over the weekend was titled, "Markets may be caught off guard if Fed hikes the rate this week." I said the world is just so fluid and fast moving, and since Brexit it seems never have so many got it so wrong. Nate Silver, the US pollster, ranked Donald Trump's chances of being the next president of the United States at 34.4%. Now, the first thing to observe is that this is a two-horse race. The second thing to observe is that event risk surely favors Trump. Over the weekend, a deafening explosion rocked New York, injuring 29 people, blowing out scores of windows and forcing the evacuation of at least 2 buildings. The blast went off in a 4x4 by 3 foot construction dumpster outside the Townhouse Inn of Chelsea, reported the New York Post. This time, the narrative behind the explosion did not cross the threshold. Just imagine a situation a few days before the vote where the narrative crosses the threshold. In a tightly fought race, such an event is going to move the dial big time in Trump's favor. Probably move the dial significantly further than Nigel Farage's poster showing a queue of migrants and refugees moved the dial in favor of Brexit. It's all about turnout, something Gabon's President Ali Bongo worked out a while back. Bongo's stronghold, Haute Ogui, province clocked a 99.93% turnout versus a countrywide average of less than 50%, with 95% voting in favor of Bongo. If Trump can turn on and turn out his base, and Hillary can't, then this is a toss-up. Now, where will the world be in the event of a President Trump? Who really knows, or who can predict that? 34.4% seems to be a trading buy. As of last week, investors owned the biggest long position in the VIX ever. The VIX is the Chicago Board of Options Exchange Volatility Index, reflecting a market estimate of future volatility. It is artificially suppressed, in my view. Now, let's just go back to the G20 and the extraordinary situation where President Obama had to exit his plane from the rear and without a red carpet. It was not a mistake, it was deliberate. Of course, President Obama could teach Sun Tzu to the Chinese, and he did when he said, "I wouldn't overcrank the significance of it." We've got a lot of planes and helicopters and a lot of cars and a lot of guys, and you know, if you're a host country, sometimes it may feel a little bit much. What we know is that President Xi Jinping's hard-edged and this diplomatic snub caught on the 24 hours news loops was the equivalent of being slashed with a knife in broad daylight. The Asia Times carried a report last week which speculated China may seize the Scarborough Shoal during the final weeks of the US presidential election as America's gaze turns inward. If China is going to strike in the South China Sea mid-September, right until the November presidential election could not be a better time, explained a senior Department of Defense official who agreed to be interviewed but not identified. Or put in a different way, another US defense official, again speaking on background, explained Beijing's best window to take advantage of certain trend lines and cement its claims in the South China Sea is right after the G20. American newspapers won't give front page status to a China story during the heart of the election. Well, unless they start shooting, and they won't be that stupid. For Beijing, the timing is perfect. If Xi Jinping is seriously ready to make this a put-up or shut-up moment for the US in the Pacific in what is considered a lame duck period for a US president, then we are in for a very interesting moment, a moment of possibly enormous geopolitical volatility. The Fed that meets this week, the market has a September rate hike of 25 basis points priced at less than 20%. And just one rate hike before year-end, priced marginally below 50%. It's been a groundhog day with the Fed who have barked endlessly and have done little else. A September rate strike would catch the markets off guard. With so many curveballs out there, Paul Virilio's wealth is the hidden side of speed, and speed, the hidden side of wealth, is something to ponder. I like this never-ending ups and downs of what is quickly becoming the hottest geostrategic flashpoint on the planet, none other than the South China Sea. Put up a photograph of Hillary Clinton. I retweeted Nate Silver over the weekend. I said, it is event risk such as this which puts Donald Trump over the top. Investigators stopped a car and took 5 people in for questioning in NYC bombing investigation, officials said. Nate Silver, again, it's definitely on the quiet side, but otherwise a fairly normal night in Times Square, 20 blocks away. Interesting piece in Foreign Affairs, Japan's pivot to Africa. Under Prime Minister Abe, Japan has been looking to boost its global standing. In that effort, the country's relationships with African states have become key. The most recent signs of Tokyo's pivot to the continent came in late August when Abe traveled to Kenya to attend the 6th TCAD, a meeting convened by Japan, 54 African states, and several international organizations. At the conference, Abe pledged more than $30 billion in Japanese investment to infrastructure projects across the continent over the next 3 years, the largest such commitment in TCAD's history. Abe's investment pledge reflected a broader shift in Japan's policy in Africa from aid to trade and from government to the private sector. Last month's TCAD was not short of symbolism to this effect. The meeting was the first of its kind held in Africa instead of in Japan, and Abe, whose public remarks painted his country as an economic partner rather than a donor, brought more than 100 Japanese business people along for the conference. I actually met with Abe in the KICC. I'll put up the photograph just before I spoke to him. And my piece after that conference is also on rich wrap-ups. Abe said, throughout the continent, I cannot but think we're witnessing a quantum leap. Let us advance together, Africa and Japan. The future abounds with blazes of bright colors. Japan, of course, trails China, which recorded total trade with Africa of about $179 billion in 2015 versus Japan's $24 billion. They don't need to be in every single African country. They don't need the votes of the UN, so I expect them to pick their spots. And if you think about it, the Indian Ocean is an appendage of the South China Sea. Abe said Japan bears the responsibility of fostering the confluence of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. So I do foresee Japan, alongside the US and India, seeking to contain and triangulate China in the Indian Ocean. President Putin has carried a parliamentary election with little trouble. Here he is seen in a photo during the celebrations for Moscow City Day at Red Square in Moscow. I'll also put up a photograph of Aleppo via BAI Aus. Very unfortunate incident over the weekend, and essentially I think that puts a fire under this truce. American Army Special Forces in Al-Rai in Syria is something I found from Twitter. Moving on to the currency markets, let's take a look at what's going on there. Euro dollar 111.61, dollar index 95.89. US consumer price index climbed 0.2% after being little changed in July. Japanese yen 102.03, Swissy 0.9789. The Aussie 0.7531, India rupee 66.885, South Korean won 11.1854, the Real 3.2652, Egyptian pound softening on the official rate, but obviously the unofficial rate is considerably higher, 8.9254, and the Rand firming up on a narrowing current account deficit, 14.1345. Sterling, I'll put up a one-year chart. I think this is a great buy zone right now, right here, and stop it at 127.50. Farage, this is a video link he's posted. Those of us on the Leave side were perfectly clear. Brexit must mean proper border controls and out of the single market. He's now playing hardball. Aurelia posts chart of the euro dollar. Take a look at that. It's holding its own actually, and not reacting like the other currencies when the dollar firms up. It seems to be able to hold its ground. Alibaba's rise, fall and redemption since its debut. This is from Bloomberg. And then more than 1 in 4 Japanese people are over 65. He's got a big challenge there, is to import human capital. Global investors have bet $7.3 billion on Australia's busiest port. A group of global investors, including QIC, agreed to pay Aussie $9.7 billion to run Australia's busiest maritime hub for 50 years, betting on a steady income from the port's daily stream of containers and new cars. Commodity markets, funds dumped gold at the fastest pace in 4 months. This is according to David Inglis. Gold 1318 area and 1304 is the key area. Crude oil got a bit of a boost this morning, up 1.8% in New York following a 6.2% slide last week. Aurelia has posted a crude oil chart. We're coming very near support levels. We might bounce, but I think we're going to fall back down to about 40. Oil bounces. Venezuela sees output deal between OPEC and non-OPEC, and Libya suffered clashes. All the big Persian Gulf oil producers are pumping near record levels. Russia's oil output hit a post-Soviet record 11 million barrels a day in the first half of September. So they're still pumping like crazy. Bloomberg graph shows Mexican peso's real-time gauge for US election sentiment. As Trump rises, it falls. Foreigners have pulled money from Philippines every session since August 23, longest streak since global crisis in 2008. It appears only around a dozen heads of state from the 120 non-aligned movement made it to the meeting held on the Caribbean island of Margarita. This is Venezuela. Authorities did not supply a list of attendees. Maduro, who's been hit by low popularity and a deep economic crisis, hailed the meeting as a triumph. Most high-profile heads of state in attendance at Margarita were Mugabe, Cuba's Raul Castro, and Iran's Hassan Rouhani. I'll put up a photograph that was retweeted by Nicolas Maduro. Coming to Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, Zimbabwe state-run hospital Harare stops doing surgeries because of shortage of drugs such as painkillers. That tweet was from Haru Mutasa of Al Jazeera. I spoke about this on the 25th of July when I said countries like Zimbabwe feel like they're right at the edge that Hunter S. Thompson described thus. The edge, there is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. South African all shares up 2.25% this year, not participating in the emerging market rally we've seen in equities. Dollar rand 14.1345, firming up towards the top of the range. Egyptian EGX 30 up 12.99% this year. I like this photograph that President Buhari posted of him arriving in New York ahead of his participation at the 71st session of the UN General Assembly. The S&P ratings agency has lowered Nigeria's credit rating to B from B+. Expected annual inflation rate is now 17.6% from 17.1% in July. The Nigerian all shares down 2.74% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 10.52% this year. Yields on Zambia's 2024 dollar bonds dropped 6 basis points to 8.97% in Lusaka from as high as 16.3% in January. We've had this tremendous rally in African Eurobonds. Well, obviously, there's been some nuance within that rally. Currencies to politics bedevil African central banks. Rates task, and this was a good point, internal dynamics, I think, will influence the monetary policy direction more so than what's happening externally. This is Yvonne Mango. Nigeria's central bank is in a tough place. Growth dynamics in the economy are at multi-decade lows. We expect the central bank to raise rates. Charles Obo has tweeted that Ethiopia will still be Africa's winning economy of 2016, and then he's referring to the case of Heineken. This is Martin Davis of Deloitte. Adesina of the African Development Bank met with President Hollande, and he was delighted with his meetings. France strongly supports the African Development Bank, he said. Banks' rising appetite for risk-free securities hands Treasury cheaper credit, as an article in Business Daily. The 91-day T-bill currently trading below its 5-year average of 10.4% at 8.087%, while the 182-day T-bill sold at 10.812% last week. I said it was entirely predictable and predicted that banks would rush to the safety of risk-free assets. The flight to quality has been a major part of the narrative for quite a while now. The Rate Cap Act has further accelerated this trend. And then I said, yes, I also think investors will lengthen duration, particularly where government yields are above the cap. Trans-Century has rallied an extraordinary 171.11% since August 25. The Nairobi All Share edged lower on Friday. It's down 9.69% year to date. NSE 20 is down 20.66% year to date, fell 1.04% on Friday, but it's about 90 points above its multi-year low from the 30th of August. I'm deeply grateful that you stopped by. Do have a look at my MindSpeak presentation if you've got a second. I will be grateful.